endeavors. How are you managing it all? And what is your advice to someone who wants to produce outside of their 9 to 5s and venture into new endeavors? And I was telling you guys that basically I don't know how I do it all, and I don't do it all, and that there's so much more that I want to do. And that's why we're here talking about it all today, is how can we manage all that we want to do. And if it seems as though anyone's doing it all on Instagram, they're not. It's not reality. So yeah, so those are the pen pal letters. You guys already know the deal. Make sure to DM me at Pennie Peace and email me pennie.nasty@gmail.com for questions. I don't have all the answers, but from my life experiences, I can help you guys out. So let's get into the interview, background, and what led you to specialize in this and to create adult ADD. How did you get here? Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'm Rach. And so yeah, I essentially created let's say like a newsletter, a Twitter page, an Instagram page, so many different resources to help adults with ADHD under the name Adulting ADHD. And so that came about in 2020, and it was never my plan to be a creator. So I'm a young Black woman in their 20s from London, first generation immigrant, background is Nigerian. And so you don't really see many of us who talk about having ADHD or talking about being neurodivergent. There's still a bit of
Right.
like kind of a taboo and a stigma attached to it. And so how I thought there was something different and wrong with my brain. And at first I thought it was because I'm a middle child, so I've got two sisters and they're 2 years
Yeah, I'm a
apart
middle
from both
child
of
too.
me. Really? Yes. And so
Yes. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Yeah.
exactly. But I really had that middle child syndrome. I just like do my own thing. I'd go a bit rogue and I was a bit of a tomboy. So but it
Hmm.
was a bit normal. And then in 2016, a couple of years ago, I'm 29 now. I'm not going to do the math because I think I have dyscalculia, but I was in my 20s. Uh, and I just realized I was just forgetting things. I'd leave my house and just like for a second forget where I was meant to go. I was a bit all over the place. And then it just was too many weird things were happening at once. So I do what we all do,
Hmm.
and that's of course we go to Google, type in what's wrong with me, and I landed on early onset dementia, strangely enough. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
yeah, and so I was like, okay, maybe this is it. I go to my general practitioner, and I said to her, look, these are the issues I'm struggling with. I think I have early onset dementia. She didn't laugh, but obviously she finds it amusing. I'm like early 20s coming to her with this. And she
Right.
gave me a memory test on the spot. So I had to repeat like really like baby words like cat, beach, play, but I had to say it backwards. But I passed the test, obviously. And she said, well, you don't have early onset dementia. You're probably just disoriented. So that was in 2016. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what's wrong with me. I never
Yeah.
would have guessed ADHD because, as we know, like lots of girls don't get diagnosed with ADHD in childhood and it's seen as kind of like a boy disorder.
Hmm.
So following that, fast forward to 2 years in 2018, I saw a documentary. I won't say which one because it's not popular with the ADHD community, and I see why it is a bit problematic. But
Okay.
watching it, it followed the lives of like adults with ADHD and how some of their lives were transformed with medication, and they struggled to do basic things like chores, the issues they were having with their relationships. And I was like, these
Yeah.
are grown men. And then I saw a grown Black man on there like crying. And I was just like, I never felt like so seen. And I think at that point, I knew adults could have ADHD. And then 2 weeks later, I went to my GP. And I'm like, right, this is it. Gave her some examples in childhood. She had paused and said, well, I don't think you have ADHD. We had this back and forth. She referred me. And then about a year and 6 months later, I had seen two psychiatrists. And then I was diagnosed with ADHD combined type. Yeah.
Yeah. So were you diagnosed with the inattentive one or the hyperactive one, or which one exactly?
Combined. So it's both.
Oh, combined. Okay, combined type.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so it took them what, 2 years to figure that. Oh, your camera kind of went off.
Oh, it's showing for me. I can still see.
Oh, I think yeah, it still says it'll be fine, so it'll come back. Okay, so yeah, so it took about 2 years for you to get a true diagnosis.
So yeah, so in the UK we have a free public healthcare system called the NHS. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's free, but everything is very slow. And so when I had
Mm.
started the process, I was on the wait list, close to the bottom. So from seeing the GP to the first psychiatrist was about maybe 9 months, and then another 9 months from seeing the first psychiatrist to the second psychiatrist. Because when you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of diagnosed by the NHS, you have to have two psychiatrists, especially before they say you completely have ADHD. So the final one checks the other one's work and meets you in person and does that questionnaire. So yeah, about 2 years, a year and 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had so my mom actually she had like a bit of like a nervous breakdown
Oh
when we were in
no.
college. And after that, they just kind of like dove into her mental health overall because none of us ever went to the psychiatrist or anything like that. And they found out she had adult ADD
Oh wow.
along with depression as well. And so they suggested for like all of us to get tested because it can be
Oh
hereditary. And I
wow.
was like 20, like six at the time, I want to say, and my brothers took it, I took it, and I was the only one who actually had it as well. And I always
Mm,
like wondered something's off, but I was super smart still, and it was
mm.
easy for me to like take a test. Like I don't know, I just could like memorize things, but
Oh
like
wow.
it was. It, but it always felt like I was finessing it. You know, it didn't feel
Yeah.
like I never read the full textbook. Like I never read through the full research paper, but I could finesse my way, talk my way through whatever. And so I was okay, but I knew that I was still like struggling. And actually in undergrad, one of my like friends, she had Adderall and was like, "Oh yeah, I take it for this." And I took it and it literally like it was like my brain like opened up. It was like the
Oh
craziest
wow.
situation ever. I'm like, this is how I'm supposed to feel. I was making like literal all A's in biology and all the things. I'm
Ah,
like,
it's amazing.
this is yeah, and it's so crazy. I was like, is this how I was supposed to be my whole life? Like, what if I missed out on
Mm,
scholarships and all of these things? And just because I didn't know. So that was kind of like my journey. But what happened to
wow.
me, which I want to know what happened to you as well, was after being diagnosed, taking different medications, like the medication kind of made me like I took it for all through graduate school up
Uh-huh.
until I was maybe 28, 29ish. It kind of changed my personality a little
Oh
bit,
wow.
or like just change different things about me. And I wouldn't even say my personality, but like on the weekends, I wouldn't have much energy, you know, because I was like just so up throughout
Uh-huh.
the week, or I would crash in the evenings. And also the fact that I'm a really social person. I've always had like a talk show like this or something like that. And it's
Yeah.
just took away the like the personal, I don't know how to say
I get what you're
interpersonal,
saying.
like yeah. So I want to know like what was your experience with that, and if you still take medication, if you mind sharing, and just also like what you've seen with people that you've helped out or talked to, like your whole spill on medication. Yeah.
That's a really interesting like experience you've gone through because someone recently told me the same exact thing and I was quite surprised because he asked me, do you think you know, he asked me about like medication and he said, well, he's worried that when he takes it, it's going to change his creativity and like change his
Yeah.
personality. And then fast forward, it actually did, like to him. And so back to your question on medication, so when I was diagnosed, that the day of, my psychiatrist asked, "Do I want to start medication?" And now I'm not a big medication person because I'm anemic. I had to take medication for that, and I didn't like the side effects. And have also had migraines on and off for like 12 years, and I was on strong medication for that, and I didn't like the side effects. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like to him, not really, but like let's go through like the medication and let's kind of like discuss the pros and cons. So luckily he had like a table of like different ADHD medications. So of course you have stimulants and non-stimulants, the ones that last to 3 to 4 hours and the ones that last up to 12 hours. So we went through every single one line by line. And I know a lot of people don't have the benefit of having a psychiatrist that does that for me, but that
Right.
kind of reassured me because I was like, really, no, I don't want to take it. And then I said, well, start me off on the baby dose. So I started on like 5 milligrams of like methylphenidate. So in
What's
the
it called?
UK,
Could you say it
um,
again?
so the chemical is called methylphenidate, but the actual drug
Mhm.
name is Medicanet, and it's the same um, chemical that Concerta is like kind of like made with. Because in the UK, Adderall is illegal, so we can't
Oh
have like
wow.
any of those. Yeah, it's illegal.
Okay. Well, that's probably a good thing. But okay. Yeah. I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
so yeah, it is. I think in quite a few countries, well, in the UK it is. So I started off on a small dose, and I has taken medication. I was already into my professional career, so I did not have this like during university, like you did. But what I noticed was that I would crash very easily, and get maybe like irate towards the end of it. I was on short acting
Right.
meds, but my psychiatrist, he had said like there's going to be a titration period, and it's pretty much trial and error. Like you're like it's really rare that someone finds the one instantly. And so I had increased my dosage, and then I had spoken to one of my friends. She goes by ADHD Alien on Twitter. She makes like
Oh,
comic
I follow
books.
her too. Wow.
Yeah, like really close
Yeah.
friends, and I've got to them like in the DMs because like by then I was creating content, and I didn't want to psych anyone out that I'm experiencing this, but I did in the end tell people that I switched, and she was just like, yeah, she's had that experience. And I said to my GP, I need to speak to the psychiatrist and I need to switch my medication. So I went from short acting meds, which last up to like 4 hours, to kind of long acting meds, which lasts up to kind of like 9 hours. And then
Mm-hmm.
I've just increased my dosage since then, and I'm still on medication right now, and the one I'm on like really works for me. My personality is still the same. I'm very extroverted. I think it not heightens that, but it just doesn't dim that. It makes it, I think it brings
Right.
out the best in me, but not everyone has that experience, unfortunately.
Right. And when I would say I never took a non-stimulant, so maybe that's something that I could like explore as well. Because
Yeah.
me and my mom, yeah, we're trying to figure out what should I do, like because I don't want to do Adderall anymore. So, but I've never done a non-stimulant before, so maybe that should be a good. And it's crazy, like in America, I mean, I feel like they push that at people, which is just crazy. Like they push Adderall, they push
Uh,
Vyvanse, they push those first before the others. You kind of have to do your own research and ask about different ones, and then they'll end up telling you
yeah.
about it. So that's like very interesting.
You should try it
So
because I know someone that's on a non-stimulant. So she was actually on a stimulant, and now she's like speaking about her journey on like a non-stimulant, and she's just like it's working wonders for her
oh
because it's
wow,
like because even if you have like certain intolerances, like stimulants might not react like well with whatever you're taking or whatever like conditions you have. So it's I mean a really good psychiatrist or doctor will basically tell you stimulants, non-stimulants, and go through each one, and then you can make that decision. But that
hmm
doesn't happen everywhere. So yeah.
so are there any side effects with the non-stimulants? Is there any like appetite suppressant, like or any that you've experienced, or you just feel like fine? You just feel yeah.
So I'm on the stimulant, so I'm not sure what the side effects of a non-stimulant, but
So you transferred to a stimulant.
no. So I've always been on a stimulant. Sorry, I know someone who transferred to a non-stimulant.
Oh, so okay,
Yeah,
wait. Let's go back. So the one that you were talking about before was a stimulant, but it just wasn't
yeah,
Adderall.
yeah. It wasn't
Oh,
Adderall. Yeah,
I see what you're saying. Okay, okay. And I think you mentioned about like the personality. It kind of got bigger because I also noticed even with my mom, like with the Adderall, we like sometimes she would over talk and like or just like over explain or like just like
yeah,
go deep into one topic and I noticed myself doing the same way whether it's I have to research something I'm like going in on it whatever and I think that's also like another like insecurity that I had that made me like be like okay I just want my real self like I want my real
yeah,
personality nothing extra so I know that other people experience that as well so I think from the medication topic though we can take like really researching on your own and looking at non-stimulants and stimulants and like
yeah.
you have to be stuck to one to whatever they give you basically.
Exactly. And I would say, like, check with like your healthcare practitioner, even once you've done the research and you speak to them, kind of get their take on things. Because I find a lot of the times, like when I've tweeted about medication, people ask me, so which ones are you taking? Which milligrams are you taking? Like, how many hours
Yeah,
does it
people always
last?
want
And
to
it's
know.
yeah, and it's just like it's not that I don't want to offer up the information, but I don't want them to go and say, well, because you're taking this, I think this is going to work for me, so I'm going to tell the doctor to give me that. And there was some of that like on Twitter, not just with me, like a couple of years ago, where people were like comparing meds and some if you go to a healthcare practitioner who doesn't really do their due diligence and says, okay, this is what you want, but they don't know about your other conditions or like how it will react with you, then going off of what somebody else is taken isn't like great. So yes, do your
Yeah,
research and then speak to
'cause
like a
it's
healthcare
really
practitioner.
it's so specific. It's so
Yeah,
specific. It's almost like because all of our brains are just extremely different and our bodies are extremely different. So there's no you can't say, oh, I did 15 and it worked for me. Like it doesn't work like that. But that's one thing I remember, like just wanting an answer though, because it's like, okay, I know this can help me and I know this works because I felt it work.
Yeah.
But like, what is it? Like, how do I figure it out? But I guess it's really like a trial and error journey to
Yeah.
figure it out. And I feel like even sometimes, like, because Adderall did work for me at one point in my life and then it didn't. So it's like in different
Yeah.
points of your life, it could change on
A
what you need
hundred
and what you
percent.
don't need. Yeah, yeah. So I see on TikTok, which kind of, not to say that it pisses me off, but it does piss me off, like just all of the OD content
Oh
of like,
gosh.
yeah, and especially so I feel like I've been making mental health
Oh my
content since
word.
before the TikToks and stuff, and yeah, it just kind of turns me off the buzzword and all of that. I feel like you've been making content since I had ADD too. So I've seen your stuff since forever. So I know you've seen the uproar too. So like, what do
Yeah.
you think about like people like like not misdiagnosing, because who knows, but just like TikTok diagnosing themselves, and
Yeah.
also like if you can give us a rundown of like the different types of ADDs from your perspective, yeah.
This is such an interesting topic. First of all, I'm going to say, so yeah, I have been creating content since like 2020, but there's been like loads of amazing people who have been creating content outside of TikTok. So people should definitely check that out. I've done
Yeah.
pieces for like New York Times, Mashable, BBC, I've spoken at Facebook, lots of these companies. So it's like doing my research and not just creating content for like a viral moment. And so
Right.
I don't want to put everyone in the same basket, but I remember like during the pandemic, it's when like a lot of people found out that they might have ADHD or they do have ADHD. And again, there's such a lot of great content out there. But I had remember scrolling on TikTok and seeing things that I think some creators are purposely being general to the sense, so general and saying this is ADHD. So
Mm-hmm.
someone could say, well, if caffeine doesn't work for you, you have ADHD. Like something like so general like that. Or someone did like a video of like disco lights and then them like partying. It's like, yeah, this is what it's like having ADHD.
Yeah, like
And
no.
it became a bit like of a circus because the reason why, like, I don't want to police anyone's kind of like behaviors or content, but it's like there are real people who are actually struggling with ADHD and like the consequences and how it's impairing their lives. And if they are watching someone's content and you're a big creator and you're showing like this goofy, amazing side of ADHD, they could be watching it thinking, okay, what's wrong with me? Maybe I don't have ADHD, and they're not going to get the help that they so deserve. And so I think there are people who are deliberately making generic content to go viral and to get an audience. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first set of people. There's a second set of people who are talking about what they say are ADHD traits or symptoms, and they are absolutely not. And I'm saying they're wrong because what happens is a lot of people will go on the internet and talk about certain traits that are like very associated with like autism or OCD or even dyspraxia and decide, well, it's under the neurodiversity umbrella because I have ADHD and I struggle with this. I'm going to point it and paint it as this and say it's ADHD when it's not. A lot of these conditions are like comorbidities of ADHD, so they can overlap and people can have both. And then you have some people who are willfully like mentioning traits that are very associated with other conditions, and painting them as ADHD. And then you have people who are doing that but
Right.
have no idea because they haven't done their research or they've seen something and they run with it, or they just don't really understand how their brain works, and that's okay. So this is why it's important for people to kind of like take information, but then do your own research, because if you have OCD and ADHD and you're only mentioning the ADHD part, you're probably not going to get help to address the issues you're facing because you haven't really kind of looked into the OCD part. And so some people, like, obviously, sometimes they can't help it, but I think it's really important to kind of look at, different comorbidities of like ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, agree 100%, literally. What symptoms, I think you talked about a couple of them, like what symptoms would you say are just not ADD that people that you've seen, or it's a popular thing that people are saying, oh, this is that, if that makes sense.
Oh, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. So I think they can coexist with people who have ADHD, but like certain things like tics and like stimming. So tics is like people who have like tic disorder or Tourette's, but if you have ADHD and both, you could have tics. you can have like
Or anxiety
Tourette's
can have tics
or
too. Like,
anxiety. Yeah,
yeah.
so like not saying that it can't be ADHD, but there are so many underlying factors and overlapping traits with other conditions that people may or may not be considering. And
Hmm.
like stimming, it's very associated with people who are autistic, and there are so many people who are autistic and have ADHD,
Hmm.
and so probably not picking up the maybe the autistic side. So I'm not saying people don't have these traits or can't experience these traits. It's just that I think sometimes the labeling is wrong, and a lot of the
Right.
times people just don't know, and sometimes people do know, but because they've got this ADHD brand, they want to keep it all under the same umbrella. So the main point is to kind of like just you've got people watching, so if you can educate them and you know better, like try to kind of like do better, because they are like our psychiatrists and the doctors aren't telling us like a lot. We're learning from people like online and community, so it's important to kind of have that duty of care to like the audience.
Yeah. And I'm really shocked that like TikTok is not, or just like, I'm not sure if it's FDA, like, like whoever isn't kind of monitoring that, because it really is like it can be a misdiagnosis for like a lot of people. So I'm like
Yeah,
shocked that TikTok hasn't like on the back end figured out a way to either put like some type of warning up or something that this is not medical advice or something like that.
yeah,
But I guess content is content, honey. So I guess no one cares. I don't know.
yeah,
Like, I guess.
exactly.
So what unique challenges do Black individuals, and more specifically Black women with ADD, ADHD, like often face that others might not? I feel like as a Black woman from the South, and even just like an African woman, like we're
Yeah,
expected to just be on our P's and Q's,
yeah,
dinner ready, work done, like itinerary, just like super planned out. Especially like the Southern woman is just like what, quote unquote, just a woman who has it all together and like runs the home,
yeah.
all those things, which I aspire to be. And I always am like, what's it gonna look like when I have kids? Like,
Oh, me
where
too.
I'm like, I'm moving my mom in. I don't care what no one says. So whatever. So yeah, like what unique challenges though have you seen that are just different for black men and women?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I actually lived in the South, so I know what like a Southern Belle is and all of that.
Yeah.
Also in North Carolina, I was out there last year, love
Oh
it
my God,
there.
exactly. Hmm.
Yeah. Question. Yeah. So I think first of all, you see that like there's a lot of underdiagnosis of like Black women and girls with ADHD. So like that's our like very first hurdle, especially if you're like outwardly showing to have ADHD traits. So like for me, I was like very restless in the classroom. I'd always call out, I talk a lot, it was a bit disruptive, I couldn't pay attention. And as a Black person, you're like likely to just be labeled as lazy or disruptive, and like you're almost
Exactly.
like not given a chance or given a benefit of the doubt for people to assess, okay, maybe it's a bit more. Whereas I think with like white kids, some areas they do get that benefit of the doubt because of that race factor.
Hmm.
So and then also the second thing is like when you're like a Black woman, especially in the corporate world, you have so many competing barriers. Like you're Black, you're a woman, you're young, and then you have ADHD on top of that. So it's kind of like internal insecurities because you think, okay, well, are these people behaving the way they are because maybe because I'm incompetent, or is it because I'm Black, or what is it? Because and then you start kind of like second guessing yourself, and then that kind of like spirals out into the workplace you're in. And then there are some people who are quite horrible like that in the workplace, so it's not given basically a fair shot, and not having people around you that's supportive and wants you to work to your strengths in the
Yeah.
workplace. And I think the final thing, if I remember what the final thing was, oh yes, the ADHD tax and the Black tax. Oh my word. So a lot of people struggle with ADHD. It's very real. But I feel like when you're working class and you're an ethnic minority and you've grown up in an area that's not very like well to do, the ADHD traits that you struggle to manage can is likely to impair your life kind of like a lot more.
Right.
So there's a difference between, oh, I'm so forgetful, I forgot my keys at home, versus I'm so forgetful, oh my gosh, I forgot to pay this credit card bill and now my
Yeah.
credit's messed up and like a bank's not going to loan me this, or I can't afford to do this. And I think when you're like when you're like an ethnic minority or from a working class background, you're usually the latter.
Right.
And so ADHD tax is basically said the cost, kind of like the cost associated with difficulty managing certain ADHD traits. So imagine kind of like having that, which is kind of the example I gave about being forgetful, it cost you. and the black tax, right? Where you have to
Mm-hmm.
support like your family, your extended family, people around
Mm-hmm.
you. And if you're struggling with like the ADHD tax on top of the black tax, it could be crippling financially.
And I think like I would say that systematically it's we already have something like over our head. So it's like
Yeah,
I feel like yeah, I feel like we will just be labeled as lazy or just like thrown away. We're easily disregarded anyways.
yeah,
So yeah, and you could be the smartest person in the room, but just have this one thing that but it just looks like, oh, this person's lazy or this person can't do their work or this person's always late or whatever the case
yeah.
may be, and you're just like brushed off when it that could just not be the case. I saw something on your Instagram about like, do you tell your boss about your
Yeah,
ADD or ADHD? And I actually told my professors in graduate school, and it was very helpful.
yeah.
They would definitely give me more time for projects. They would understand me just so much more. But I also went to a creative school, so that's
Nice.
a whole different thing. Yeah. So yeah, do you tell your boss, family, friends, people about that? And also like, what do you think family members, partners, bosses can do to assist or like support someone who's struggling with ADD?
Yeah, this is a good question. Maybe I'll start with like family members and friends and then go on to bosses. So when I was going through my diagnosis process, I didn't tell my sisters, didn't tell like my family or even my friends because I didn't want anyone to discourage me, right? Because again, this I think there's still a bit of a stigma when it comes to like mental health and also neurodiversity in like Black communities. I'm not sure if it's a global thing, but the stigma is there, and I know it was there. And so it's just like I didn't want anyone to first discourage me during the process or to be like kind of like undermine the decision that the doctors made. So in the end, I told like my sisters, like my family, and my sisters were like, okay, it was quite obvious you had ADHD. But I do get quite a lot of like Black men actually messaging me saying, what do I think should they tell their families and how should they explain it to their families? And in some cases, I actually just give them like free decks. I sell ADHD flashcards. I just give it to them and I said, have a read of it. If that's going to make it easier, just show your parents that. But I always say,
Mm,
like, don't do anything you're not comfortable with doing. And then also, I know some people who have done that and they've received like bad backlash and feedback from their parents, and it's really like knocked down their confidence. And that's when kind of like community like comes into the fold. And what I say to people is that it's not your job to convince these people, like your family and your friends, as much as you love them, that you have ADHD. Whether you
mm-hmm.
kind of like have the diagnosis or not, I think their response is to be, okay, how can we help you? Like, help me to understand. How does this manifest X, Y, Z? And unfortunately, some people don't have supportive friends and family members like that. I was
Right.
lucky enough like to have that and people who kind of like understood. So I think that's what I'd say from the family and friends perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like for me, a lot of my like shame and guilt came with like, okay, like if I'm late to something or if I'm not responding to a friend or even when it's in dating and like emotional irregulation when it with ADD and stuff like that. So like
Yeah.
it's kind of like do like how to get someone to understand, I guess, if that's what you want. But yeah, like like how have you seen it work in dating and like what advice I guess would you have when it comes to that as well?
So interesting. So when I got diagnosed, it was like 2020 January, and then 2 months after that, the UK went into lockdown for the pandemic.
Mm,
So that's everything shut down. It's just like no one's going anyway. So like dating wasn't like it was just basically quite impossible
right.
until I actually started dating again in 2021. But the person I was dating had already seen seen me online, but I had met them before like my social thingy kind of like blew up. So they already knew I had ADHD, so I didn't have to like basically tell him I have ADHD. Like my page was there. He also, I think, through like hanging out and spending some time together, he also thought he had ADHD and actually was trying to start the process of having ADHD.
Okay.
So luckily, that's I'm not with that person, so I'm probably going to have to think about that in future. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm going to be very open and upfront. Maybe third, fourth date, depending on how it goes, because I think now that's an important
Oh,
part
you're
of my
breaking
life that
up.
I shouldn't have to. Oh, did it cut out?
Oh wait, it's back now. It's back. Okay, we're good.
So give me 1 second. So I was
Mhm.
saying that the next person I do date, I'm going to be quite forthright with it earlier on because that's an important part of my life, and I don't want to feel like I have to hide it. But then also there are going to
Mm-hmm.
be some things that I might do differently, and not that I'm my ADHD is going to be an excuse. It's more going to be a reason, and to give a heads up, like if I've done something, well, let's have this open communication, or if I can do something a bit better. And also, if I feel like they could do something better for me as someone with ADHD, I think it's a healthy kind of like communication, basically, to have with a partner. What would you do? What's your take on that?
So I feel like I've never. Well, I just started to tell people with because I have the podcast, so I talk about it. It's like they're gonna hear it anyway,
Yeah,
you know. And what I found like really effective though is a partner that understands and also helps, but like your partner has to really see you. Like they have to
yeah,
see you beyond this thing, and they have to be like, oh, they have to know, okay, this girl is smart, this girl is amazing, she's perfect, she's all the things, but sometimes
yeah,
she might forget, you know, she might forget to do something, or sometimes she might struggle to start her work. If you see her just sitting
yeah,
there just staring at the wall, it's like, let's like tap her on the shoulder, like, hey, do you need something? So I think I have found that honestly I have to find someone who is emotionally what's the word? I'm blanking on the word right now. Emotionally
I
intelligent, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
enough to like, yeah, to like work with me through that and just kind of be of support. And then also if I do date someone who has it as well, we just kind of like help each other in a sense.
yeah,
So I think just having, because my mom is very, very supportive, like my family, like we're the type of people to like, if we see you sitting for too long, do you need some food? Like, do you need your rest? Like, we're
yeah,
very just like those kind of people. So I'm realizing that I need that as well, or else I'm gonna like
yeah.
shame and guilt myself, like, and just negative self talk. Like, I'm not a woman. Like, how am I not a woman? I can't wash these
Yeah.
clothes. I can't cook this food. like,
Yeah.
you know, so I do want to like, how do you even deal with like, because I know I have a lot of negative self-talk because I
Yeah.
feel like one of my biggest fears is like not reaching my potential. And
Oh
I
my
think
gosh,
the
me
only,
too.
yeah, it's like, oh my God, I know I can do all these things. Like, I know that we're all special. So like, how do you deal with like the negative self-talk? And then I do want to go into, before we end, like coping strategies. Like, we can talk about all day, like how, like what are the solutions? So yeah, how
Yeah.
do you deal with any negative self-talk that you do to like give yourself about like deadlines or like ideas that were never turned into fruition? Like, it eats me up at night sometimes. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. So negative self-talk. So like I'm a Christian, and I think
Okay.
I've only been like really, so I've born and raised a Christian, but I've only really like been like had like I'd say my personal like walk with God like during the pandemic, and like up until now it's kind of strengthening that. So I
Mm,
think I know I can't do it like on my own. So I would like read
mm,
scriptures, like I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and like for I know the plans and purposes I have for you. So it kind of for me it's like, you know how people have like their daily affirmations, some of those like
right.
motivational scriptures is kind of like a reminder like things are going to work out for like my good. And sometimes that doesn't work. So sometimes I listen to worship music, or like I listen to like some really good motivational speakers. And so for me, it's like Les Brown and Eric Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with Eric Thomas, it's like that tough love, right?
Oh,
And
Eric,
so,
yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I like him though. I
yeah,
like
I
some
love it. And
yeah.
some people don't, but for me, like, I know how I am, and I know, look, I can create an excuse and I can procrastinate for like forever and a day.
Yes.
And so
Oh
I
my
need some time
God.
for someone to just tell me to like get up, and you're going to want to need to succeed as bad as you want to breathe. That's what Eric Thomas
Oh
says. So
wow.
it's a kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of listening to like that, and then sometimes just like speaking to my friends and having a community of friends where you can just be vulnerable and open to talk about like how like we're really feeling. And sometimes like my friends are going through like who don't have ADHD, and then we just encourage and uplift each other. And it's not like highs every day. I'm currently in therapy, started CBT, so that's kind of like been helping. So it takes kind
Mm-hmm.
of like a lot of things. And then sometimes I'm just going to accept like life isn't always mountain. Sometimes they're going to have low days, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's just making sure I don't spiral into kind of like depression. And that's when I like try to catch things quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. So in therapy, I've never had a therapist who like specialized in ADD, and I don't even think I've had a CBT therapist. So can you explain what a CBT therapist is, and does your therapist like give you strategies and stuff like that with your ADD?
Yeah, it's good. So I actually never really like done like research into like therapy or
Hmm.
therapist. So, like I said earlier on, we have a public healthcare system, and now in my borough, and I think in many boroughs, they're just offering free therapy, so 6
Oh
sessions. And I think
wow! Shout
they've
out
like
to the UK. Oh my gosh.
yeah, I think they've done it for a while because I've had friends who done these for like years ago, and so they kept sending me text messages, and I think the uptake in my borough was very low. So I was just like, why not try it out? It's free, and so ultimately they said, well, it's gonna be CBT, and that's cognitive behavioral therapy. Like I can't give you like a massive download on what it is because I didn't research,
Yeah.
but what we go through is basically the tools to help me like worry less and manage my anxiety and to move forward. So it's like and it's homework. So let's say I worry so much, like she helps me to realize, okay, so why do you worry? What is that behavior doing? What are you feeling? Those type of things. And I have to go away and do workbooks. So list down the practical worries, so worries that you can actually deal with, and then hypothetical worries, which are worries that you can't really control, and sometimes it's future based. And then it's that workbooks and worksheets to basically get you to kind of like get yourself out of that, but going through
Hmm.
the theory.
Hmm.
So I'm going to do a YouTube video about my experience because I'm still going through it. Not
Hmm.
that I like a lot of ADHDers aren't fans of it, and I can see why, because sometimes it feels like a lecture to me. Like you could have just sent me this notebook and I could have done this myself.
Yeah.
But speaking to her, she's a black woman, and I had told her, look, I have ADHD, so some of these tips in this book and what you're telling me is just not going to work for me that way. Like sitting there thinking for like 5 minutes, and she would just adapt the approach to me as someone with ADHD. She'd be like, so why don't
Hmm.
you try this? She sent me like a procrastination handbook, and we unpick like how ADHD is kind of like impairing me and like working alongside my anxiety and things like that.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm gonna read what it is exactly as well. So,
Okay.
cognitive behavioral therapy, but that was like really, really good. Is a psychosocial intervention that aims to reduce symptoms of various mental health conditions, primarily depression and anxiety disorders. CBT is one of the most effective means of treatment for substance abuse and co-occurring mental health disorders. And from what I know, from I was a psych major as well,
Oh
is
wow.
yeah, for undergrad is to it's more of like action based. So you
Yeah.
actually, yeah, it's like some therapists are just like, okay, let me just like listen to you and you just like vent, but
Yeah.
this is more okay, like what are we gonna do about it? So if you're looking for solutions and things like that, like I think CBT therapy is the way to go. Or if you've been in regular therapy for like a while,
Mm,
CBT, and you're like trying to, you want some type of change, I think CBT is like the next step also. So yes. Okay, so let's do tips and just like advice for someone who can't get like medication yet, or they haven't done that, or just like different ways to get shit done, because I think that's like the thing is like
mhm.
I need to get my shit done. So I can go first while you think about what you want to say.
Yeah.
Like what's been helping me is I do the Perdomo method, that's 25 minutes on, and then I do like 5 to 6 minutes off whenever I'm trying to get a task done. That's been helping me out a lot. And then definitely always working out. People think it's so cliche, but that really does help like
Mm,
clear the mind. Um, and I'm still trying to figure out what else I like need to do, but those are my top
yeah.
two that I'm just like, okay, if I can't do anything else, that's what I can control. And yeah, and I feel like sometimes with me, I'll do like all of the small things, but I'll
Yeah.
push off the things that kind of look bigger and the things that actually are going to move the needle in my career. I'll push
Mm,
those off, and it's like, okay, I've done all these things. I did have a productive quote unquote day, but I didn't move the needle. So I also want to know like what's your advice on that as well. But yeah, those are my two things that I do no matter what, if all else fails.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's really good. I use them as well. Okay, so I'm going to do like three things. So, I think the first thing a lot of people struggle with is like motivation. We know what we want to do, like we've got plans, we've made the list, and motivation. And again, some people don't have enough, like they say they don't have enough energy, they struggle with brain fog. And I think for me, a lot of that was down to me
Yeah.
being anemic and not taking my medication and supplements. And so I do think if you're feeling like demotivated and you feel like you're struggling with brain fog or fatigue, get that checked out because that could be like one of the major hurdles stopping you from actually producing like and moving forward. The second thing in terms of like practical coping strategies, I mean, I have loads of my flashcards, but for me, gamification methods. And so that's essentially using game-like tactics to kind of like motivate you to start and finish a task. And
Mm.
for example, like seeing like writing an email as a mission and saying, okay, I've got a timer, I've got 2 minutes to complete this email, and then like racing against yourself. That
That's
works for
fun.
me.
I've heard of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds fun. I need to get your card. I saw that on
I'm
as
gonna
well. I
send
need to
it
get
to you. Don't worry.
oh
Send me
yeah,
your
okay.
address.
Yay,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. Yes.
All
Mm-hmm.
good. So that's like one. I grew up playing video games, and so that works for me. Like, so I find that there's lots of coping strategies, but just try them all. The second one is the reward system. So if you're someone who loves Netflix, loves like sweets, or like loves listening to podcasts or whatever, you can deprive yourself of these things until you complete a certain task. But it really holds like you have to have like a certain amount of discipline. So I'd say like, if I'm working from home, I would just say if I don't finish this I need to finish this document before I can watch another episode of, let's say, Bridgerton or something like that. And that actually works for me, like depriving myself and then
Mm-hmm.
rewarding myself once I've completed something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that's so good. I think that the reward system is really because I feel like with me like podcasts or YouTube whatever like that's like kind of what I put on just to like calm my mind down. But I'm
Yeah.
noticing it's definitely just a distraction. It's just like
Yeah.
so I'm not just like thinking about all the things. It's just like a so to use that as a reward instead of turning it on while I'm doing my work will
Yeah.
definitely like help me get more things done for sure.
And then the last
Um.
thing
Mhm.
before I just remembered is productive procrastination, right? And so that's basically stopping what you're doing and kind of like procrastinating, but doing another thing, but that can help you progress. So let's say you needed to wash the dishes, but you didn't feel like washing the dishes. You decide to do your laundry. You're still getting something done, even though you're procrastinating from getting the dishes. So like
Mm,
things
mhm.
don't just stay like never done. So kind of like task switching and chore switching and yeah, and sometimes when I once I've done one thing, I've got like the endorphins and the energy to the other thing that I was procrastinating on, and so I just do it instantly, and it works for me.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to leave the people with as far as advice goes? And of course, tell us about your cards, tell about your website, where they can find you, and things like that.
So I say for advice is tap into a community. You don't have to go down the road and scream that you have ADHD. For
Yeah.
me, it's just yeah, having an online community. So I was anonymous for a year and a half. Like I didn't have a face or a name on Twitter, and I like built up a following and community. So if you don't feel comfortable showing
Mm.
yourself, just make an account. You don't have to like reveal yourself.
Be the
Um,
brand face of it all. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'd say for me, Twitter is the best one because it's instant communication and you don't even have to speak to people. You can search the hashtag Ask ADHD or tweet at it and it's like a bot that automatically retweets your tweet and people can find it and that respond to you. You can just search keywords and get involved in conversations or advice using Twitter as a bit of a search engine. There's like Discord groups, Facebook groups, Instagram groups. So
Hmm.
like try to like find your community just so you feel like you're not alone, especially if you
Right.
struggle to speak with people in person. And then the final thing is like don't be too hard for on yourself. Having ADHD can like feel like a bit of a death sentence. It can like feel like a lonely journey, but it's just that our minds work differently, and there are so many strengths that we can work to.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame that some people just don't have the community or the tools to kind of like enable them to work to their
Mhm.
strengths.
I do want to before you go on, like I had it on my cards, like the beauty in ADHD and ADD. There's so many talented like geniuses who have it as well,
Yeah,
and it's like it's actually like a magical superpower too because there's no way like this is gonna sound so like egotistical, but like good at a lot of things or just can
yeah,
do a lot of things
a
or just
hundred
like
percent,
I'm like yeah, and it's honestly like a beauty because people are like damn like why like your resume it looks crazy like what how are you even able to do all of that. So it's just about like finding that beauty and knowing how to like stabilize it and just knowing how to work with it and navigate it because it
a
actually
hundred
is like
percent.
a great thing as well. So yeah. Oh, and also
Yeah.
before we go on, I forgot about this part. We always end also with before you do your Instagram and stuff, like what's been bringing you peace of mind. So you can continue with what you were gonna say and then
Oh.
go into that. Yeah. And then yeah. And
I think that was it,
mm,
on
okay.
the advice. So it's what's been bringing me peace of mind.
Yeah, it can be lately, it could be like forever, it can be small, it could be anything that comes to mind.
So I'm currently 2 months into my career break. I have like non-stop worked and like
Mm-hmm.
insanely. And so just having the time to like think, to create, to spend time with people, I love and I like, that's been giving me peace of mind. So just not having the stress of like working and the rat race and corporate, for
Mm-hmm.
now has been giving me peace of
Mm-hmm.
mind.
And I'll do mine. I think what's been bringing me peace of mind. I was traveling so much, which was super duper fun, but I really strive when I find a routine. So I've been able to like kind of get into routine in the past 2 weeks. So that's definitely been
Nice.
bringing me peace of mind. And also, I was drinking so much while I was vacationing. So just like being sober has been I've been like super still and like really like clear minded as well, and just able to like focus and just do my interviews like this. So that's also brings me peace of mind as well. So
Love
yeah.
that.
Mm. Yeah. And so now we can go into like what you're working on, your where they can find your cards, where they can find you.
So what I'm working on is, so I want a career switch. So I've career
Mhm.
switched like 4 times now. It's the brilliance of ADHD and just being a
Right.
comedian and being able to go into like different careers, completely like
Mm-hmm.
fresh. So I'm hoping to transition into tech, so like cloud computing or cybersecurity. So
Okay.
trying to now study for like some certifications. But where you can find me on Instagram, Adulting ADHD, the same on Twitter. I have a Substack newsletter, which is adultingadhd.substack.com. And a very new announcement, I am starting a YouTube channel, which is, of course, called Adulting ADHD.
Yay!
Yeah, hopefully should be out. My first video hopefully should be out this Sunday, but it's going to be talking about, of course, ADHD, anime, gaming. I'm going to be like doing stuff in my video, so it's not going to be just be me
Love.
talking at the screen and maybe guests. We'll see. So yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank
That was like
you.
yeah, that was amazing. That was so much fun. Also, I love when it's like fun and also we're learning. Like that's ideal for the show.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So